The following program is being presented to you by a community producer. The statements, views, and opinions expressed are not necessarily those of ALC TV or the City of Avon Lake.
Welcome to Common Sense. Common Sense is a series of shows that feature interviews with interesting people so that we can learn in a clear, concise, and direct way who these folks are, what they do, and what makes sense to them and what doesn't. I'm Rudy Breglia, and today I'll be interviewing former North Ridgeville Council President, financial planning executive, business coach, dentist, optimist, and current proponent of Convention of States issue, Dr. Ron.arndt, a man of many talents. Thanks for your service, and welcome to Common Sense.
Wow, what a lovely introduction. I sure appreciate that. You're very kind, but being here is a treat, and sitting here with someone as articulate as yourself is helpful for me to share the story that I want to pass on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't you start us off on talking about your background, where you were born, where you've lived, that kind of information.
So born in Cleveland, 1946. So that gives you an idea of my age. Okay. But born in Cleveland, essentially raised in Parma. That's where I graduated from high school. And then 8 years at least at Ohio State and college. So I was in Columbus for a period of time. And then once graduating from dental school, I moved to North Ridgeville, where I have been since 1973.
Okay. Well, let's start in the most important aspect of your life. How do you like being a papa?
Well, that is...
Five granddaughters, I understand.
Yeah, five granddaughters, all under the age of 6.5.
Wow.
So imagine this, when you get to 69, you have no grandkids, and you're thinking, oh my, what's going to happen? And then poof. Overnight. So
they all appeal like magic.
Yeah, yeah, they are. Interesting, wonderful little kids. Certainly, of my 4 careers, it's probably the most energy-filled one, because for any of us who are grandparents, recognize what it's like, especially if you have all 5 of them around at one time. It's exhausting. It's exhausting, but it's wonderful. It's just been great.
They're absolutely beautiful. Well, I've seen their photographs.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, tell us about how your career evolved.
Well, I originally thought I was going to be a teacher. Then I thought I was going to be a pharmacist, discovering all the chemistry that I was going to have to take. And I thought, oh no, that's not going to work. How I found my way to dentistry is still a mystery to me, because I had to take more chemistry than if I had gone into pharmacy. However, I did my undergraduate work at Ohio State, got a bachelor's degree in radio and television. Okay. I think pretty unusual for folks going into dental school who typically had degrees in the sciences, whether it's biochem, physics, right? Finished dental school and came up to North Ridgeville to set up my practice, and it was really because it was encouraged by an uncle of mine who was a family physician in Elyria, said, this North Ridgeville is going to be a growing community.
Yeah, you bet.
And once I got there, I discovered there were only 2 dentists, but there were only 8,000 or 9,000 people at the time. So I really had the opportunity to come to North Ridgeville and really start from scratch a fun practice. And then after 20 years of practice, I got recruited by a financial planning and investment management firm to come into their organization, and the concept is how to create an economic future of choice rather than living out of hope. And I left practice, much to my surprise and wonderful support of my wife, quite frankly. Was there for 5 years, and I discovered travel was too much. I was away from the family.
Yeah.
And so I left, took 7 months off, tried to figure out what I was going to do with my life, and found the professional coaching world. And from that time on, for almost 16 years, I coached dentists, financial planners, CFPs, accountants out of my house. Great. It's a great career. Yeah.
Understand. What was the most challenging profession?
Well, all of them were challenging in that the learning curve is steep, right? Yeah. You being through a PhD program can understand how challenging those can be. And yet, of all of the careers, I think the coaching was the best, the funnest. I know that's not a real word, but what it did is it brought together my dental background. I had gotten an MBA while I was practicing dentistry, the business world and so forth, and enabled me to really make a difference, I think, in the lives and the businesses of the clients that I was able to serve.
Okay, well, that was very interesting. Why are you fearful about what's currently happening in America? To change gears a little bit.
Sure. Well, I don't think I sit here alone. People aside from you and myself, all you have to do is look around and see the mayhem, the vitriol, the anger, the upset, the disappointment that we're finding in our country. And it's so tough for folks to even find a way to communicate. Families are coming apart, friendships are dissolved, all because we're finding ourselves unable to communicate because we become so bipolar, this issue or that issue, and it's frightening. And I'm concerned not so much for myself, because I'm closer to the end than I am to the beginning. Yet when I think of my daughters and their families and the grandkids, your grandkids, people in the audience, this is frightening. As this is not the country we once knew. And I know we can debate that as to what was good and not good. However, it seems like we're losing our way.
Well, what do you see as the most troubling changes?
Well, the overreach of our federal government has become horribly obtrusive. And you need not look very far than just the past few years. And this has nothing to do with a particular party as much as it is mask mandates, vaccine mandates. We're being told how and when and where we can educate our kids. The government is shutting down our schools. You don't have to look any further to see, whether it's the former president who's being invaded by our FBI. They're doing it. We just saw this week of a gentleman who is a pro-life fellow was raided with guns almost ablazing in front of his family. And then you look at what's happening financially in our country. The $1.9 trillion bill that was passing money out. And then we see recently the Inflation Reduction Act, and it really is a misnomer. But I think, look at the fact that almost $800 billion spent of $80 billion to hire 87,000 IRS agents. That's frightening. And then we can also look at just in the past 2 weeks when it was decided we're going to forego $300 to $600 billion in school loans. This is money that you and I and people in your audience quite frankly, have no choice on how that's being spent.
Yeah.
So those things, I think, are critical issues.
What is a constitutionalist, and why are you one?
Well, I guess I never really thought of myself as a constitutionalist until I became far more active in the Convention of States. But my understanding and my belief about that is that it's constitutionalist is somebody who believes more in liberty, freedom of choice, less government, and I think more importantly is where I've discovered is they are people who adhere or choose to adhere to the more original Constitution as it was written, right? And so I didn't realize I was that much of a constitutionalist, but I think I'm becoming that more.
I see. How is the federal government broken, and what is causing this?
Well, I listed some of those things already. If you begin to realize that our federal government, first and foremost, has come into being by virtue of the states. So the states are the parents. The federal government are the kids.
Yeah.
Somehow we've got this mixed up.
Yeah.
Right? And so when you think about how our federal government has now is usurping the power that is constitutionally provided for us in that amazing document. And so we're losing our choices, we're losing our liberties, and it is frightening.
Understand. What will happen to us if these deficiencies are not corrected?
Well, we already can see what's happening, all right? We see crime is skyrocketing.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, in people that I've talked with, when you think of their travel plans, they aren't going to Chicago, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., L.A. Why?
New York?
Yeah, they're horrified of what the potentials are to get mugged and robbed and beaten. So we get to see the crime. We've seen how the government has continued to overreach. Do we really need an educational department? Do we really need some of the excessive government hands in the till for us? And you also can see that how people aren't communicating at all anymore. And God, I had to get off of Facebook years ago because people that I thought liked me, I guess they don't like me after I make a few of my observations.
I see. And I think you have a slide on this. What does Article 5 of the Constitution say regarding how to make amendments to that document?
So the beauty and the brilliance of our founders is truly remarkable in that they created, in the writing of that Constitution, Article 5. Article 5's sole purpose provides the opportunity to propose amendments to the Constitution. So Article 5 describes how you can do it. There's two ways. One is by virtue of both houses of our Congress. If we could get 2/3 of those two bodies to agree to amend the Constitution and whatever that specific subject matter is, that's one way we can amend the Constitution. Thanks to Colonel George Mason, way back in, I think it was September 15th, 1787.
Founding father.
Yes. He said, whoa, wait a minute. We know that when power is centralized, yeah, into the hands of a few, that tyranny is the result because it's power. So as a consequence, what he did is he proposed the second element to Article 5, and it said, we have a bypass opportunity. We know that our federal government is not going to reign in its own power because we just know the human condition.
Yeah.
So he said, here's a way to bypass it. If we can get 2/3 of the several states, so in this case, currently, if we can get 3 or 34 states to agree on a specific subject matter, we too can propose amendments, not ratify them, but propose them. So Article 5 provides us now with a tool to deal with some of the mayhem and the frustrations and the anger that I've been describing earlier.
Okay, what is a convention of states and why should it take place?
So a convention of states, I also want to make a distinction, is not a constitutional convention, because
right.
that's what opponents want to say, is we're going to rewrite the Constitution. The Convention of States is the antithesis of that. So why should we have it? Because it is a tool provided for us by our founding fathers that says, hey, look, if we don't like the way things are working, our Constitution is a structural document. Mm-hmm. If we need to make changes to the structure of our Constitution, we've got a legal, a logical, a safe, and a constitutional way to do that. So now through the Convention of States, if we can get 2/3 of the states, 34 states, to agree, we can now convene a convention to which all 50 states are invited to participate. And then at that convention, we develop potential amendments that will be discussed, debated, and eventually voted on.
How does a convention of states work at a state legislative level? Do current procedures exist? And I think you have a slide on this.
There is. There is a slide. As a matter of fact, well, I don't know if it's a slide. It's a PDF document that I shared. And in this document, it walks us through the process. Mm-hmm. So simply stated, someone like you or myself petition our legislatures, like a Senator Manning or a Representative Gail Manning or a Dick Stein, who is one of our representatives. We petition one of our legislatures, who then, shall they embrace that mm-hmm. and feel the same as you and I or whoever is proposing that, then takes it to the House and that legislative body, which then puts it into committee, where the committee then discusses, debates, they hear opposition, they hear proponents, and then if it's voted out of committee and then onto the floor, then that's when it gets voted both in the House and in the Senate. So that's the way it works currently, and that's the way we would see the Convention of States happening in Ohio.
Okay. How many state conventions have been conducted in our history?
Well, interestingly enough, there's been over 33 intra-state conventions of states since the beginning of our republic. As a matter of fact, there were 11 intra-state conventions of state. Understand, conventions of state, even before the signing of our Constitution. So there is a long precedence and a long history of how these conventions of states will operate.
Okay. What is the limited role of the U.S. Congress in the Convention of States process?
The U.S. our Congress has only ministerial duties. Okay. And by that, what I mean is, if we get this 2/3 of the states to agree to convene a convention, okay, it's then taken to the U.S. Congress, to which the only responsibility that Congress has, the only input, the only influence, the only directives is to identify the time and the location of when the convention will happen.
So it's a very limited role.
They have no role other than identifying the time and the location.
How are state delegates or commissioners chosen for the convention?
So, good observation, commissioners, because we typically think of them as representatives or delegates, but the term is a commissioner. Each state has its own responsibility and authority to determine the commissioners. So there could be one state with send 50 commissioners, another state can send 2, but it's dependent upon the individual states. Good example might be one of the directives in Louisiana, who is a state that's already passed the resolution. So in their state, an example is they're going to have 5 commissioners. 3 of those commissioners will be elected by the current sitting legislators in both houses. Mm-hmm. The other 2 commissioners are coming from we the people, their population. And then they will have 3 backup commissioners, 2 of which will be from elected representatives, 1 from the people. So that's one model that is being used among the different states, who each get to select their delegates or their commissioners the way they choose. And here's an important point, is you may have 10 or 15 or 3 or 40 delegates or commissioners, only one vote for each state. So those commissioners are going to have to caucus and make a decision so that that one vote for that state, right?
Okay, how are proposed amendments ratified before they are introduced into the Constitution?
Specifically stated in Article 5 is the way any amendment, whether it's an amendment by our U.S. Congress or by our Convention of States, 3/4 of the states must agree to any proposed amendments that come out of this convention. And I don't think there's anywhere in any of our voting in our country that we have such a high bar. 3/4, that means 38 states. Mm-hmm. So one of the opponents' arguments is that this is going to be a runaway convention. Can you imagine 38 states validating or agreeing on some crazy amendment? It seems
pretty
impossible.
Tough,
yeah, it does. It sure does.
How large is the Convention of States movement right now?
Right now, there is over 5.5 million supporters across the country. There's, by the latest count, just about 2.5 million petition signers. And in Ohio, for instance, we're just about at 108,000 petition signers. So this is a grassroots movement across our country, and it's exciting to see and feel when you're in the environment where people really, really want to see some changes.
What are the proposed amendments, topics that are common to the current application or resolution that have been passed by states?
Okay, so this is going to be the first convention of states ever in the history of our country since our Constitution was adopted. So there's been over 400 applications historically for conventions of states, but they've never come to pass. And the reason that they haven't come to pass is we couldn't get 2/3 of the states to agree on the subject area. So currently the subject area in the resolutions that Convention of States is advocating. It's also in HJR 1 and SJR 4 here in Ohio. And the 3-topic subject matter is rein in the overreach of our federal government. 2, term limits. Term limits not only for the elected officials, but federal judges, potentially the Supreme Court, and most notably the bureaucrats. And then the 3rd one is rein in this unending spending of yours and mine and everybody else's money. So those are the 3 subject areas.
Okay. How many states have passed the current Convention of States legislation?
We have 19 states that have passed, so 19 out of the 34 gives us 56%, something like that.
Okay.
For just this year alone, we've got 6 states where one of the houses has passed legislation waiting for the other house. Mm-hmm. And there's 26 other states currently considering the resolutions in their legislatures.
Now, you may have covered this. What does the Convention of States project believe are necessary currently to curb the abuses of power by the federal government?
Well, if you think about one of the biggest ones is going to be term limits.
Okay.
And the idea is, as we mentioned, discussed earlier, is power corrupts, and folks in office for extended periods of time, people get elected as Republicans and Democrats, and yet what it feels like is they're not so much interested in supporting the people, they're more interested in getting reelected in power. And so if you imagine some of the craziness that's going on in our country, imagine what it would be like if somebody was term limited. They come in, do good work, because I do believe that most people truly are going into those offices because they want to make a difference. But keep in mind, our Constitution, structural document, and when you look at how some of our structure is broken, so if you have bad politicians or bad people elected into a broken system, we're going to end up with poor results. On the contralateral, you take somebody who's a really good, honest politician, you put him in a broken system, what do you think the results are going to be? And so the concept of shifting and rotating our politicians makes good sense, and likely is a way to curb some of these excesses that we see happening.
Understand. What is, and I think you have a slide on this, HJR number 1, or House Joint Resolution number 1, and why do you and Representative Gail Manning support it?
So HJR 1, this is what you're referencing.
Okay.
And this is the resolution, the specific resolution that's been presented in the Ohio House.
Uh-huh.
And in this resolution, it addresses the 3 specific subject areas: fiscal restraints, limiting the power and the jurisdiction of the federal government, and limiting the terms of offices for its officials and members of Congress. Also, and most importantly, it says that this resolution will be null and void if you ever attempt to attack the Bill of Rights. Uh-huh. So there are those people who say, well, Article 5 and the Convention of States is all about taking away the Second Amendment. Specifically, this resolution says you can't do that. And thirdly, then, it also states that if a delegate or a commissioner goes to the convention and misbehaves, doesn't follow the specific directions and the directives given to it by its legislator, they are brought back home. And in some states, they are subject to felony charges.
Okay, well, that's pretty serious.
It is serious, yes.
What organizations object to the Convention of States?
Well, there's a lot of them, and we've heard the term drain the swamp, and I like to use that term in that folks are seeing that we're getting over the target, Convention of States. And I think the natural condition is, don't rock the boat. I don't want to see changes. Yeah. And so you've got a lot of union groups, especially government union groups. You have the John Birch Society, you have the NAACP, you have Common Cause, a lot of these uniquely named George Soros funded organizations. Those are the folks that are saying, whoa, boy, Convention of States seems to be developing some momentum. Yeah. I don't think we want to see this move forward. So we have our hands full.
Well, what are the major objections that these folks have towards the Convention of States?
Well, there's several. I've already mentioned it. The big one is it's going to be a runaway convention, meaning you're going to send these delegates or these commissioners to this convention. They're going to rewrite the rules. They're going to do anything they want, and then they're going to rewrite the Constitution. Well, that's absolutely false, because Article 5 clearly tells us we can only propose amendments. There's no ratification. We can't rewrite the Constitution. So the runaway Constitution is a misnomer. That's one of the objections. Another one is it's a con-con. It's going to be a rewriting of the Constitution. Well, again, with the same logic that I just shared, we can't write a Constitution because all we're doing is proposing amendments. Another argument is, well, just follow the Constitution. We already have it. Well, but here's the real question, though. Which Constitution are we talking about? Are we talking about the original Constitution that you and I, right here, in this little Constitution, in here, this little pocket Constitution, 4,400 words, or up to 7,000 if you include the amendments, right? So that's the Constitution that we know of.
Original.
It's the original one. But are we talking also about the Constitution that we're operating under today, which, if you can find it, you go to the government printing office, 3,000 plus pages for 300 or more bucks. You can get that printed. So the question is, which Constitution are we following? So those become some of the objectives or the opponents. And the other one that often is brought up is Article 6. One of the tenets of Article 6 in our Constitution is we hold the feet to our elected representatives to the fire. In other words, they pledged an oath to our Constitution. Well, the fact is, how well is that working?
Yeah.
You see, again, people, I think, by intention want to go in to do the right things, but something happens when you get in there. It gets corrupted. And so the fact is, we only have 4 options here. One, we can continue sending, with the idea of sending people to Congress and they're going to do the right thing. And we've seen that's not working out. Another one is to think some magical epiphany is going to happen. The third is do nothing. The fourth, well, quite frankly, we've got the solution with the Convention of States.
Right.
It's right there for us.
What can Avon Lakers do to help your efforts on the Convention of States project?
We love the excitement and the energy when people come on board. Avon Lake, anywhere in our state, and quite frankly across the country. There are so many ways that people can be helpful. We recently did a booth at the, let's see, what is it, the Lorain County Fair?
Yep.
We got over 850 petition signers. People could help volunteering at those kinds of shows, gun shows. They can be help us with our social media. They can be people who can get into small groups and explain the story of the Convention of States. So there's all kinds of ways they can volunteer.
Understand. How can you be contacted?
You can contact me at ron.arndt@cosaction.com, or probably the safest and the fastest way is to go to conventionofstates.com. You can sign a petition there. It also is a website that is absolutely packed with incredible information that will explain in more detail some of the things that I've shared here with you today.
Right, and I think the contact information will appear on the bottom of the screen when
Okay.
this is finally completed.
Great.
In summary, what's making sense to you and what doesn't?
So here's what doesn't make sense. If we continue to do what we've always done, we'll continue to get what we always got. So the question is, are you happy with the way things are? And if you're not, because that just doesn't make sense to me. What does make sense? The excitement, the patriotism, the legality of Article 5 of our Constitution is finally a solution. Think of it as a revolution without bullets.
Okay. Well, I think you've represented the issue very well today, Ron.
Thank you.
And thank you for doing it, and thank you for your service.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Well, and thank you for watching today. If you have any comments on what's been covered today, certainly you can contact us. If you would like to appear on the show or know interesting people like Ron, please give us their contact information, and we'll see if we can follow up and work on that. Remember, seatbelts save lives. Mm-hmm.
The preceding program was presented to you by a community producer. The statements, views, and opinions expressed were not necessarily those of ALC TV or the City of Avon Lake.